All right. Well, this morning I wanted to talk about a chapter small chapter that we've all heard about, we all known about Ruth. Not exactly sure who wrote Ruth. If it wasn't for her placement in history, it probably wouldn't be there. But it's a very significant part, because she was the grandmother or the great-grandmother of King David. And if we go look even further back, her mother-in-law would have been the prostitute, or the harlot they call her, over in Jericho, the Canaanite. And that's very unusual whenever you talk about the Israelites who was given the law and cut everybody out that was pagans and Gentiles and pushed them off to the sides like you're not worthy. But here it is, two women who stood up for something greater than herself, a moral right, with no promise from God about you're going to be blessed like this. But yet, because it was morally right in their heart and fear of God, the true God, they left everything that they had known. They left behind everything that was precious to them in this world. Be like, there's something about this. There's something about the true God. There's something about the God that you have that I want. I believe it came from the true God's light shining through those that they saw. If we go over to Ruth, we find that this right here was during the time of the judges. The time of the judges was from the time that Joshua had brought them over across the river, Jordan River. And they didn't have a king like all these other nations. The first king they had was King Saul, the one right before King David. So before that, God would allow the Holy Spirit to move on a certain people to bring them out of bondage and to take charge when they need to be taken charge and lead them, because they were following the true God. This was the time of the judges, they call it. We also find here that there was a great famine in the land of Israel. And that was the reason why Naomi, which is the mother-in-law to Ruth, went over to Moabite with her husband and her two sons. Her husband had died over in Moab. And then both of her sons had gotten wives from the Moabite women. The Moabites, they didn't serve the God, our God. They have all these other gods. And we find over in Numbers chapter 25, that that's exactly what God got on to them about. Matter of fact, the false prophet Balaam that was hired to curse the Israelites, he turned around and God refused for him to curse them. However, it was like, you cannot curse them, but you can entice them to go away from their God. And once they do that, you got them. So in Numbers chapter 25, it specifically says, while Israel remained in Siddim, the people began to play the harlot with the daughters of Moab. For they invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So we find that happening in Numbers, but yet we see that Ruth, a Moabite, from the same area that he's talking about in Numbers, but they play the harlot by going and being enticed by them. But she did the opposite. She came out and she went to follow the true God. And not only that, by her actions, she became in the lineage of King David, which was in the lineage leading up to Jesus. That goes back to 1 Corinthians chapter 15:33. Paul writes, "Be not deceived, bad company corrupts good morals. And it's like this. You have one group that's over here, that they're trying to do something, their ways, their actions, their talks, what they like, their dislike is all the world. And you're trying to be over here pure. You're trying to live for God. But yet you see that some of their ways, whether it's the money, the sex, the power, whatever it may be, and you want to be buddy-buddy with them and rub up against them. You cannot go over to them, rubbing up against them, wanting to be around them without their ways rubbing into you and sinking into you. Your talk starts to change. Your ways starts to change. And before long, you are becoming one of them. And that's what was happening in Numbers 25. Israelites was going in to the Moabites being enticed. I believe personally that the opposite is also true. That good company corrects bad morals. That being said, Ruth and Ophar, they were both married to the sons of Naomi for 10 years. They were in that household serving the true God for 10 years. And then whenever Ruth came out, where Oprah went back to her gods, back to her family, Ruth clung to her and like, no, I want to stay. I want your God to be my God. I've already tasted the fruit. I know what's true. If you stand your boundaries over here, and someone from this other group of the world sees that there's something different about you, that you are unwilling to bend, you're unwilling to start to talk like them, you're unwilling to compromise your own moral standard, then there's something about you that's different, especially nowadays. You're unwilling to sell out. You're unwilling to give in to your lust. You're unwilling to give in to power or anything else. Then you have to be different than the rest of the world. And if anyone in this group sees that and they come over to you to be around you, knowing that you don't want to be around that, now your ways starts to influence them. You cannot join into them to influence them living like them. That's what Paul is also telling Peter in Galatians chapter 2. But if we make our stand and we have a method for the way we live, not because we're better than anyone, but because God calls us to be holy, and the definition for being holy is set apart. And they see it, then that is the light that draws them. That is the light that they want to come to. And then we can change the world one by seeing the true light of God, the true light, not the world's darkness. And that's what the difference is between the Moabites that he speaks about in Numbers and the Moabite here in Ruth. Because after 10 years, we find that the two boys, Malone and Shalion, they both died. And so Ruth is getting ready to go out. In chapter 1, verse 6, it says, "Then she rose with her daughters-in-law, that she might return from the land of Moab. For she had heard in the land of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and given them food. So she departed from the place where she was, and her two daughters-in-law with her. And they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. And Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, Go, return each of you to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. May the Lord grant that you may find rest, each in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept." You see, in this time, when they say about your husbands, they didn't have a husband. The husband just now died, but they were still young enough to get another husband. And in that time frame, they looked at that as a security, as a way to continue to grow, continue the family tradition, a legacy, if you would. And that's what she was saying, is like, y'all are still young enough. Go back. Y'all can start all over. Don't just be walking around going on to me. I can't have any more children here. So, and they said to her, no, but we will surely return with you to your people. But Naomi said, return, my daughters. Why should you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands? Return, my daughters, go, for I am too old to have a husband. If I said I have hope, if I should even have a husband tonight, and also bear sons, would you therefore wait until they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is harder for me than for you. For the hand of the Lord has gone forth against me. And they lifted up their voices and wept again. And Ophir kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. Then she said, behold, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. And Ruth said, do not urge me to leave you or turn back from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus may the Lord do to me, and worse, if anything but death parts you and me. When she saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. We find all the way back in Abraham that whenever Abraham called him out of his father's house, his father's land, which he was entitled to, that he gave up all the inheritance and everything there to come out of a pagan land with gods, other gods, to live, to follow the true God. To say, if you leave your father's house, then I will give you all these blessings. I'll raise a nation up underneath you and give you all this land. That would be a really big incentive. However, she did not have this. She had no speech from God saying, if you stay with your mother-in-law, I'm going to prosper you in this way. She had no promise of a reward for doing this. She had no promise of a husband. As a matter of fact, by staying with Naomi, she was bonding herself with her, giving up any hope of ever marrying, giving up hope of anyone ever coming back into her or raising up children or anything else. She was giving up all of her hope for her life to be there to take care of her mother-in-law. Now, yes, Naomi was grieving. She had already lost her husband. Now she's lost 2 sons, all of which she had left Israel during a famine trying to find food. And now, where before it was a physical famine, now it's a spiritual famine that she has. And so she's going back to her roots. She's going back to her homeland because she hears they have food. And here it is, you have Ruth, that her kindness is the same kind of kindness that James calls on us to do, even at the expense of ourselves at times. James chapter 1, the very last part says this, verse 27,